Good afternoon, everyone.
Whoa.
And welcome to Boston University. I think because of the person we have speaking today, I feel justified in saying this. It's a little bit like a theater, so please turn off your cell phones and pagers if you haven't already done so. I'm Maureen O'Rourke, the Dean of the Law School, and I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm sorry we couldn't accommodate everyone who wanted to be in the room today. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to introduce our guest, Sumner Redstone, who has a very special relationship with Boston University, the College of Communication, and the School of Law. Sumner has been a part of the BU family for many years. Thanks to his generosity and the support of Viacom and CBS, the Redstone Film Festival at Boston University has provided an annual platform for students to screen their original shorts before thousands of moviegoers on both coasts. The Redstone Film Festival has really become part of the fabric of our campus and indeed is the cornerstone of our film program. In the 1980s, here at the law school and indeed in this very room, Sumner taught one of the first classes in the law of entertainment industries in the nation. He was known as a knowledgeable and challenging professor, and his students learned a great deal from him. Not long ago, back in 1999, he gave the commencement address to our graduates, and he emphasized that they should strive for excellence in all that they do. And in doing so, they would follow his example. Sumner has always focused on excellence, and in so doing has built one of the largest and most successful media businesses in the world. His career has truly been remarkable. He grew up here in Boston and graduated from Boston Latin with the highest grade point average in the 300-year history of the school. Yes, it's impressive. He went on to study at Harvard University and in a little over just 2 years completed all his required courses and amassed enough credits to graduate. During his junior year, he volunteered for the Army, and he was selected to join a special intelligence group whose mission in World War II was to break Japan's high-level military and diplomatic codes. He received 2 commendations from the Military Intelligence Division in recognition of his service, and after he left the Army, Harvard's Board of Overseers voted to award him a degree waiving the normal residency requirement. While in the Army, Sumner worked a night shift and attended law school during the day at Georgetown. And when he left the Army, he was accepted directly into his second year at Harvard Law School. After law school, he clerked for Judge William Orr of the Ninth Circuit and taught labor law at night at San Francisco Law School. He worked for the Justice Department as a special assistant to the U.S. Attorney General and later practiced law very successfully in Washington, D.C., where he had the rare experience among attorneys of prevailing in a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. He eventually joined his family's drive-in movie theater business, Northeast Theater Corporation, employing a combination of intellectual capacity, vision, legal acumen, and spectacular strategic planning. Sumner built that business into a media empire that spans the globe. When investing in drive-in theaters, Sumner and his father had the foresight to buy the land rather than leasing it. So later, as the market evolved, they were able easily to build indoor theaters on the land. And eventually, Sumner became involved in the content side of the business in addition to the exhibition side. It was early in his career that he coined the phrase, "content is king," and his business reflects that strategic approach. As chairman and 80% owner of National Amusements, Sumner is the controlling shareholder and executive chairman of both Viacom and CBS. His strategic mission has been to develop strong brand content and then to drive his brands everywhere in the world and to every platform. And so today his companies have operations in virtually every field of media and entertainment, including broadcast and cable TV, TV production and syndication, radio, publishing, digital media, and consumer products. His companies own such respected brands as CBS, Showtime, Simon & Schuster, DreamWorks, Paramount Pictures, Nickelodeon, MTV, Comedy Central, and the list goes on. As you watch the slideshow today, I'm sure you recognize many of those brands which now have become household names. Sumner's legal skills were crucial to building his empire and helping him to navigate his way through takeovers, mergers and acquisitions, antitrust issues, and contract negotiations. His preference is to handle business issues through negotiation and accommodation, employing litigation as a last resort. His business adversaries underestimate him at their peril. And as a lawyer, he was a very successful litigator. As a businessman, he knows when and how to litigate. Today, Viacom and CBS brands reach and influence tremendous numbers of people around the globe from cradle to grave. We're very proud to say that many BU Law and College of Communication graduates have worked and continue to work at Viacom, CBS, and their subsidiaries. In a few moments, Sumner will share some of his views with you. Then former BU Law Dean Bill Schwarz will join Sumner on stage for a question and answer session. You'll also have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the program. And now it's my privilege to introduce educator, lawyer, entrepreneur, and media giant Sumner Redstone.
Thank you, Dean O'Rourke, for that warm introduction and for the pleasure of returning to speak at the Boston University School of Law. I hope my comments will be shorter than the introduction. It was way back in 1982, during Bill Schwarz's tenure as dean, that I first started teaching a course here at Boston University's School of Law called The Law of the Entertainment Industries. It was the first of its kind. Bill, who is right over there ready to cross-examine me shortly, is someone I have known and respected for over a quarter of a century. In fact, I trusted him so much that I nominated him to the Viacom Board of Directors, which he has helped guide through the heights of the media industry. That's where Viacom is, at the height. I taught here at BU Law School through much of the 1980s, and I was awarded an honorary degree in 1994. I'm proud to say that my daughter is a BU Law School graduate, and Viacom's general counsel, who is sitting here, Mike Frickless, is also a BU Law School graduate. So my association with the university and the town of Boston, for which it is named, is both long and deep. Boston is home to me. It's my heart, my history, and of course, as I'm frequently reminded, my accent. And this school is where two of my enduring passions meet. They are education and the law. It's hard to overstate the value I attach to education. Since my boyhood at Boston Latin School, arguably it was the most rigorous and competitive experience I've ever had, and that includes business, Boston Latin School. Through Harvard College, Harvard Law, I have pursued my own education with unbridled zeal. And some of the most rewarding moments that I have had in my personal life, I have spent in the classrooms of Brandeis, Harvard Law School, and Boston University as a teacher. My passion in learning was instilled in me, by the way, by my mother, Belle, who was known to turn back the clock when I was a kid to goad me into studying or practicing piano a half hour longer. Actually, I recall this very well as if it were yesterday. Her proudest moment was the day I graduated from Boston Latin School with the highest grade point average in the history of the school. With her constant support, I had been able to triumph over poverty. We were extremely poor. I was born in the West End, which was then a tenement. I prevailed over scarlet fever and the not-so-latent prejudice in the 1930s to secure early admission to Harvard. While still at Harvard, I was asked by Professor Edwin Reischauer, you know him, he was then a preeminent Japanese scholar and he later became ambassador to Japan, to join an elite cryptography group that successfully broke many of Japanese high-level military and diplomatic codes. It was because of the breaking of those codes that the Japanese fleet was sunk. While I was code breaking, as they say, for the military, I was awarded my Harvard degree in absentia and started taking law school classes at night, which brings me to my second great passion, and it's the law. Why did I choose the law? Because it is it symbolizes two ideals I hold dear to this day: reason and justice. For all the lapses that we see in reason and miscarriages of justice we see play out in court day by day, there are scores of cases that are resolved successfully based on the constant and legitimate application of the rule of law. And that's really a good thing. I apply the mental discipline and guiding principles I learned at law school every day of my life in business. When I graduated from law school, the best job you could get was a clerkship as a clerk to a federal judge, and that's what I did. I was fortunate to write a number of really important decisions while working for Judge William Orr in the Ninth Circuit of the United States in San Francisco. At night, I taught labor law at the University of San Francisco Law School. It was interesting. Archie Cox, some of you know who he is, he taught here. Actually, he taught here when I taught here after leaving Harvard. I was a student of his. He got me that clerkship. In any event, my first real experience teaching was while I was clerking. I taught at the University of San Francisco Law School at night. From the Ninth Circuit, I proceeded to the Justice Department as what they called a special assistant to the Attorney General. That was one of the greatest and most intense experiences of my life. Over the next 5 years, I must have argued, the average practitioner, if he's in the Court of Appeals a few times, it's a lot. I must have argued 60 tax cases. It was literally trial by fire. And I was forged into one of the country's top tax lawyers then. In 1950, the head of the Justice Department's Antitrust Division and his deputy recruited me to join them in private practice. Still a young man, I was a partner in a major law firm making the equivalent of today's dollars of over $1 million a year. But money, and I mean it sincerely, has never motivated me. The passion to win has motivated me. And in 1954, I left the lucrative practice of law to pursue my third abiding passion, the media industry. I joined my father's company, Northeast Theater Corporation, at 1/20th of the salary I had been making at the law firm. And over the next 30 years, I spent that time building a handful of drive-in theaters into a nationwide, then global leader in theatrical exhibition. Company my daughter, who is a graduate of the school, now runs. And then, of course, came Viacom. In 1987, when I purchased Viacom, it was a struggling cable television programming venture with a few undeveloped and overlooked assets that everyone encouraged me to sell. But I knew those assets could have real long-term value, and I didn't sell, of course, and they did. Today, those assets, they said that MTV was a fad. I remember it well. They said that Nickelodeon could never make it because who was interested in the kids' channel? Well, today, they are two of the world's most powerful and valuable media brands. And here's what I tell you. I listen to Wall Street a lot, but Wall Street told me I overpaid. Wall Street told me to sell MTV and Nickelodeon. So in your life, in the final analysis, you have to follow your own instincts. While our subsequent acquisition of Paramount, Blockbuster, CBS, not to mention our dozen smaller jewels such as Infinity Radio, Outdoor, BET, Simon & Schuster, Paramount Parks, Famous Music. We built Viacom into a global media conglomerate, one of the largest, and I say, and you know I'm objective, the best media company in the world. And in my humble opinion, the preeminent content provider on the planet. Over 10 years, just after Viacom acquired Paramount in a brutally hard-fought battle, you know who it was, with Barry Diller, I made a bold claim. I told everyone who would listen to me, and those who wouldn't, that content is king. This was in the mid-90s. Mind you, when all the talk was of distribution, content versus distribution. That was a great debate. And the big money, by the way, was on distribution. Everyone was in a mad frenzy to build an on-ramp to the much ballyhooed information superhighway. I don't know where that went. Most of you would have been about 10 at that time. So perhaps I'll have to invoke this memory for you. Distribution is important, but what we at Viacom saw even back then was that all the platforms, all the devices, all the channels, all the technologies in the world would be worthless without content, stories, songs, programs, games, films, and so on. So it's not what it's on that matters. It's what's on it. I like to tell people today, people don't watch CBS, they watch CSI. 10 years ago, the debate focused on the impact of digital technology on distribution. Today, we are focused on some more fundamental topic, the impact of digital technology on content, and now that content should be created, managed, distributed in a digital world. And in the new digital-based economy, the protection of that content is more vital than ever, which brings us back to the bastion of reason and justice that I talked about earlier, the rule of law. In a society like ours, nothing more important. Not the rule of people, not the rule of Congress, the rule of law. Today, I'd like to argue the following thesis. Copyright is even more right in the digital age. If content is the sun around which all distribution planets align themselves, then copyright, the legal and moral position that the fruits of intellectual labor should be protected in order to encourage creative expression, is surely the gravity that binds this whole media universe together. Copyright compels creativity. It furnishes the incentive to innovate. If you limit the protection of copyrights, you will stifle the expression of new ideas. Copyright safeguards the fundamental American values of free speech and self-government by providing an economic incentive to engage in free speech. Copyright actually encourages newspaper writers, movie makers, television makers to expose fraud and injustice and enlighten us. Movies, television, music, and the printed word have a wonderful track record of providing us with not only information, but a moral compass and a call to action, all of which have contributed greatly to the democracy that we live in. Yet, there are those who challenge copyright and suggest that personal creativity is a public good and should be free to everybody. Tell a dairy farmer that his milk is now free, available to all, and he will stop raising cows. Why buy the cow when consumers can get the milk free? The music industry was drowning in free milk a mere 4 years ago. 3 out of 4 online teens were downloading music from illegal peer-to-peer networks in early 2003. Nearly half more than once a week. The sales of singles plummeted. They plummeted 61% in 1 year. The result? Just as a dairy farmer stops collecting milk, he can no longer sell at a reasonable profit, the struggling record companies stopped cultivating new artists. The market for innovative musical expression stagnated until, finally, a viable and legal option for downloading individual music films emerged in April of 2003 with Apple's iTunes, which has spawned a $2 billion market in digital music. The resurgence of respect for musicians' intellectual property has resurrected the music industry. Not only are the big companies now able to economically support these artists, but tens of thousands of smaller independent musicians have an incentive now to produce great work. Copyright unleashes creativity by making it economically viable, making it a career choice for young performers and composers, as well as recording engineers, concert hall operators, promoters, and many others involved in bringing music to appreciative audiences. Think about it. Make it as a musician or a filmmaker or a writer without the shelter of effective and enforceable copyright legislation, not possible. Which now, without some assurances that the money spent producing, marketing, distributing content is an investment rather than a donation. The assurance of copyright protection is central to the effective and efficient operation of a global media business, whether that business is based in Boston or in Beijing. Movie makers, computer programmers, songwriters, authors, they spend countless millions of hours creating ideas whose principal value lies in the countless millions of dollars that film studios, software companies, record labels, publishers spend bringing them to life and distributing them to the global public. Last year, the average U.S. studio film cost $66 million, a lot of money. That wasn't for the blockbusters. They cost a lot more. And then they spent another $35 million on marketing. Film piracy costs the United States more than $20 billion annually. Think about creating one of these blockbusters and then see it hit the streets of Malaysia before it opens as a movie here in this country. How would you feel if you were the filmmaker? It's this sort of theft that we're concerned about. If this sort of theft is allowed to continue unabated, the incentive to create disappears. The marketplace for ideas is vacated, and progress does take a back seat to the public domain. At the risk of sounding naive, let me state the obvious. Copyright is right. It's inherently right for both the creator and the consumer. It's the right thing to do. If you slave over a song or you invest years in bringing a film to fruition, you ought to reap the reward of that labor. And if you enjoy that song or that film, it's right that you should compensate those responsible for creating it in a reasonable way. I'm sure that many talented students who have participated in the Sumner Redstone Film Festival at BU's College of Communication would agree with me on this point. Now, our role, our obligation as media companies is to make an efficient market in the creative content, the content that we create. One that compensates the artist and gratifies the consumer at a price point that's reasonable and acceptable to both. That's how you encourage people to do the right thing. We all intuitively know right from wrong. We're taught it here, but we really do not need a law school to teach us right from wrong. And even the infringers know that what they are doing is wrong. Copyright infringement is theft. It's a felony. Simple as that. Copyright is right, and even more right in the digital age. So I have not changed my tune at all over these years. Content is still king. But at the risk of hitting a sour note, I must tell you, you young knights, I hope you will be, that the kingdom is under fire. The very technologies that allow us to sell more content over more platforms all over the world enable infringers to steal what we create over more platforms all over the world. Moreover, the systems we have created to protect copyright content are far from perfect. DRM technologies are improving, but many methods are cumbersome, and none will ever succeed by 100%. Suing copyright infringes, well, what it does, unfortunately, among other things, it alienates legitimate consumers. Filtering requires the cooperation of distributing companies. And although we've had good success with many partners on this front, there are a handful of outlets who ruin it, destroy it for everyone. The hole in that fence that they create attracts what we call casual infringers. The bad guys, they attract the others. And our critics, they're vocal in the policy debate, particularly overseas. With dubious logic and Wikipedic delight, a few academics and activists have seized the pulpit to demonize what we're talking about. Literally demonize the very concept of copyright, and then what they say is it's anti-consumer. They strain the bounds of logic by arguing that compulsory licenses and government regulation make sense as a way to finance creative endeavors and free speech. Now, I've been in this business a long, long time, long enough to assure you, beyond any reasonable doubt, that increased government regulation will never result in enhanced creative output. Never. But we're in a better place than we were last year. And last year, we were in a better place than we were the year before. Many, many bright minds across the media, consumer, electronics, regulatory arenas have collectively devoted hundreds of thousands of hours to devising the right solution to the ideas we're discussing here today. A consensus now is redeveloping in support of copyright protection and the fundamental rights it protects, even as we in the media industry embrace all the new functionality made possible by digital forms of distribution. For example, we at Viacom and CBS have licensed many companies to distribute our shows, our movies over the internet, to cell phones, on every platform. As an example, there's a new company we've invested in called Juiced, which actually allows consumers to watch free, they get their money from advertising, full screen, high quality TV on the internet, anywhere, anytime. And our clips are always among those because you must know Viacom is the only pure content company. The most popular on cell phones, on networks, on the internet. I said from the very beginning, before anyone engaged in this kind of debate, I remember saying when I spoke a few years ago, maybe decades, our job is to have our content on every platform and in every place on this planet. That's our job then, that's our job today. Meanwhile, filtering and watermarking solutions which allow distributors to distinguish between legitimate and pirated content are being adopted finally by many of the largest companies, user-generated content sites such as MySpace and Microsoft's Soapbox. Let me close. I am getting to an end, have no fear. Let me close on a positive note with my digital manifesto. It's a call to arms. I have issued this to my peers in our industry. First, I've encouraged my competitors to join me in declaring that we are all digital companies, that we're all operating on a new playing field, rife with opportunity as well as danger. We're all in this together. In the long run, we must all depend on the preservation of strong intellectual property rights in order for us to survive and to thrive. And that includes network operators. It includes search engines. It includes device makers. They rely on great content, and great content depends on copyright protection. Second, I've exhorted my peers in the media, hardware, and software industries to exercise their responsibility to wipe out piracy by not selling tools that enable copyright infringement or sanctioning the unauthorized use of licensed content. Third, we need to make it easy for consumers to obtain our content in a legal manner and at a reasonable price. We cannot let the lack of perfect anti-piracy tools keep us from forging ahead, notwithstanding all the difficulties, forging ahead in providing the best, the most innovative, creative content to the consumer over whatever platform, whatever medium they prefer, whenever and whenever they prefer it. Fourth, as content companies, we need to redouble our efforts to create the best, the most interesting, the most novel content, to hold the interest of our consumers. They have always been our first priority. As I used to say, content is king. I tell you, there's another king, the consumer. The consumer is king. And finally, we all need to respect the primacy of copyright in creating markets for innovative creative expression. It's basic economics, supply and demand. Consumers tell producers what they want and how much they want it and how much they're prepared to pay for it. But this give and take can only happen in a free market. And a free market, this you must remember, can only exist if intellectual property rights are respected. In fact, think about this. The United States Constitution explicitly calls on Congress to give authors and inventors exclusive rights to promote the progress of science and useful arts. You never hear about it in all these debates. The people who oppose copyright infringement never refer to what? The Constitution of the United States. Our country was founded on this principle. Our economy depends on it. Intellectual property is the growth driver of the American economy. The copyright industries contribute nearly 40% of the growth achieved by all United States private industries. And think about this. Nearly 60% of the growth of United States exportable, and more than steel, more than chemicals, more than whatever you can think of. Copyrighted material. Copyrighted material is our major export to the rest of the world. We're digital companies. We pledge to experiment. We will always respect the consumer, and we will continue to work for the protection of intellectual property. That's my digital manifesto. It's the core. It's the respect and protection of intellectual property, and that's why copyright is even more right in the digital age. I look to you, and I mean it, and your peers at law schools across the nation and the world to champion this cause in years to come. You will no doubt be making law in the digital area. These are really exciting times. When I left law school, I had no idea, not the slightest, that I would wind up at the helm of two of the world's largest media companies. There's no way you can ever know where you'll end up. All the stops you'll make, all the problems you'll have as you move along through your life. What I can tell you with some degree of certainty, however, is that the habit of mind that you have developed here at this school, based on reason, based on justice, based on discipline, based on logic, will serve you well all the days of your life. May you all have the strength and the courage, and it will take strength. It takes a lot of courage, take it from me, to pursue your passion, wherever your passions may lead you. May you do justice to the education you've received right here, and may you wield the law to fulfill the promise of your character. Without the law, there is no character. Your job, to make the world better than the world you found. Thanks a lot.
Sumner, thank you. Now I'd like to introduce another member of the BU Law community, former Dean Bill Schwarz. Bill graduated from BU Law at the age of 21 with the highest GPA in the history of the school, and he started teaching. Yes, you note a common theme here. And he started teaching immediately after graduation. He is both our youngest graduate and the youngest to serve as a law professor. To call him a boy genius would be an understatement. Throughout his career at BU and Cardozo Law School of Yeshiva University, he has held the positions of professor, dean, and chief academic officer. He's a prolific writer with over 18 books and 50 articles to his credit. When he taught at the law school, he could fill the auditorium as Sumner has today. And our students should know that Bill's legacy can be seen throughout the school. As just one example, Bill convinced the university to give us the second half, I think the top half, of the tower. At one time, the law school and the School of Education shared the building, and it's hard to imagine fitting our entire school into half the building that we have today, and thanks to Bill, it's not an experience any of you here today will have. When I talk to alumni who know Bill, they emphasize two things. First, that Bill is the smartest man they've ever met. And second, that Bill and his wife Bernice are some of the most effective ambassadors that BU Law has ever had. Indeed, many of the alumni relationships that we have today are thanks to Bill and Bernice, who is his partner in all his endeavors. I'm sorry that Bernice couldn't join us today, but I am happy that your grandson Mark was able to do so. Bill and Sumner have been friends for decades. Bill appointed Sumner to his teaching role, believing that Sumner's stellar practical, legal, and entrepreneurial skills would be a wonderful asset for the school. As usual, Bill was right. Sumner appointed Bill to his board at Viacom, believing that his unmatched legal skills and brilliant creativity would prove invaluable. As usual, Sumner was right. Bill has joined Sumner on stage for a brief discussion, and then we'll invite the audience to ask questions too. I would just ask that if you have a question to wait for the microphone to reach you so that we can hear you here on the stage. Now, please join me in welcoming Dean Bill Schwarz.
Thank you. That was the sort of introduction that my mother would have liked and my father would have believed. When you referred to the law school getting the top half of the building, The School of Education originally occupied the top half. When the dean of the School of Education was informed by John Silber that they were going to lose the top half of the building and would have to vacate and move elsewhere, he said, "What happened?" And John Silber looked at him and said, "I guess you've been Schwarzed." You know, Emerson said, the ornament of a home is the people who frequent it. And I think we're very fortunate today here at the law school and the university that Sumner has seen fit to take time from his very busy schedule to adorn our home. And we thank you for taking the time. You referred to the year 1987, Sumner, and I remember it fondly because in that year, in the spring of '87, we were seated around my dining room table in Newton on a holiday occasion. And you told myself and Bernice and members of our family that you were pursuing a company which you referred to at that time as Viacom. Not Viacom, but Viacom. Right. And it had greater vitality. And that you were going to do battle with corporate giants in Wall Street to take over this company, take control of it. And you had a certain vision at that time which Wall Street did not see or perceive. 20 years have elapsed. We're now in a new digital age, and some analysts have incorrectly described Viacom and CBS as being part of the so-called old media, and Google and others as being part of the new media. How do you envision Viacom and CBS competing with the so-called new media?
Well, Bill, you and I are old.
Not me. I'm a boy.
Not in spirit, not in action, but in chronological age, which I tell you does not count. However, Viacom and CBS are young. Right now, all of the revenue from the digital universe is maybe 5% of the total revenue of companies like Viacom and CBS. That's all 5-6%. Growing, yes. Someday it will be far more important in terms of revenue. But if Viacom and CBS were seizing on every opportunity that exists to grow our presence in this new world. One thing I will tell you, and history will prove it, a new technology does not destroy an old. It increases a market. So we look forward to rapid, and we are, expansion at both CBS and Viacom. And by the way, let me tell you about these companies. What's the most watched network in the world? Not NBC, CBS. What are the most dramas that are watched in the world? CSI, CSI New York, CSI Miami. What's the most watched comedy? 2.5 Men, CBS show. What's the most watched news show? 60 Minutes. What's the most watched reality show? Survivor. And who at the right age doesn't watch MTV? And what kids don't watch Nickelodeon? And what preschoolers don't watch Nickelodeon animation? And you say our companies might be getting old? They've just started.
Sumner, but speaking of the so-called allegedly new media, drawing upon your legal skills, you and Viacom and others have seen fit, particularly Viacom, to bring suit against Google for its actions with reference, or inactions with reference to YouTube. What do you think YouTube and Google should be doing to avoid that infringement of copyright?
I think they know from the lawsuit what they should do. And by the way, by the way, a lot of people don't know they have a great reserve set aside to pay people like Viacom. I don't want to talk too much about a lawsuit. It's ongoing. But it's a cardinal example. We forced them to remove hundreds of thousands of clips of our content, which they pirated. and which led to this lawsuit. The lawsuit was justified in accordance with the principles I've talked about all day today, or at least for an hour or so, it seemed to me. Hope it didn't seem that long to you. Yes, we'll do whatever is necessary. We're the only pure content company. I'm talking about Viacom. We've spent zillions of dollars, decades, creating that content, and no one is going to get it for nothing.
Sumner, in this morning's newspaper, there's a very intriguing story which perhaps highlights an interesting issue that the public is generally concerned about, and sometimes the news media makes an issue of it. Namely, media companies, CBS and Viacom included, have a tremendous power and tremendous control, so that the issue that arose in the newspaper is a fairly simple one to explain. Fox, evidently network, during the Emmy show this past week, saw fit to censor certain comments, or words, I should say, uttered, and they never reached the audience at home. And so the question is, what do you feel, or how do you feel about this issue of the tremendous power that media companies have about controlling the thought processes and influencing the public?
We're very conscious at our companies that we reach the minds and hearts of people all over the world through our television programs, through our networks, through our movies. By the way, Paramount, by the way, is the #1 studio in Hollywood today. But we're very conscious of that power, and we exercise that power very responsibly. As you know, we engage in all kinds of campaigns, like our campaign for HIV, which is all over the world. We take that power, that responsibility very seriously. As far as censorship, I'm against it entirely. At CBS, nobody, not I, not Les Moonves, nobody else, can ever tell the news people what to show, what to talk about. Even if they offended me, I would never presume to say, do not tell that story. That's known as journalists. I want to tell you an interesting story. I was in China. I go there a great deal. I've been there maybe 8 times in the last 5 years, which is one of the reasons why in China you can only see MTV and Nickelodeon. You can't see Disney, except in a hotel, on News Corp. In any event, I was with Jiang Zemin, the last president, with whom I was very friendly, and one of our announcers had just done a terrible story. I think it was Dan Rather, on Jiang Zemin. And he said to me, Sumner, we're friends, fire him. And I said, look, I know how you feel, but we have a doctrine in our country called journalistic integrity. We cannot tell the people who disseminate the news what to say. However, if you want, you can go on 60 Minutes anytime you want. Well, he never did. But that illustrates a very important principle about censorship and journalistic integrity. They're among the principles we're very careful to ensure at these companies.
So going back to your teaching career, I remember vividly one of the things that you were most proud of was the fact that you worked in this virgin area known as entertainment law. No one had written a case book, and you compiled in a very short period of time a 1,200 solo-produced case book. Other than that issue, that's one highlight certainly, what other feelings or proud feelings do you have about teaching as a career?
First, I must tell you, I didn't do it alone. I had the assistance of a student here by the name of Tad Jankowski. Tad is now General Counsel of National Amusements. So it pays to work hard. What was the rest of you? Oh, my proudest moments? I always enjoy teaching. I tell you what makes me really happy to give a lecture and have the students come up to me afterwards and follow me out and ask me questions. Among the schools I teach at are a Harvard Law School, usually once a year. And when the lecture is over, Bill, and I walk out, there's always a lot of students asking me questions. That makes any teacher feel good.
What aspect of your own legal training do you think has been most helpful to you in business?
Every aspect. You know, I don't want to offend those who go to business school. Business school is largely academic. At law school, the day you get out, contract law, tort law, every constitutional law, every one of those disciplines has been important to me as I started with exhibition and into Viacom and the rest. And I practice that law every day. Believe me, I sometimes even participate in the writing of complaints when I feel strongly about the issue. The law, I feel, has given me a great advantage over my competitors who have not gone to law school.
Sumner, you touched briefly upon your experience in China.
Yes.
Perhaps people in the audience don't realize the global scope of Viacom and CBS. Perhaps you'd comment about that.
Well, I have basically, first place, the international part of MTV is the fastest growing part of MTV. And as Philippe Domon, our CEO, has said often, I have been busy planting the flag of Viacom all over the world, whether it's in China. I recently went to Turkey to open a 24-hour channel, and then to Ankara to talk to the Prime Minister about media regulation. I went to Germany recently, had dinner with the mayor to launch Comedy Central. I went my second trip to Dubai and Kuwait. I'll tell you an interesting story. I was there the first time, only 5 years ago, as a guest of the Crown Prince. He pushed his driver out of the car, and he actually drove me around. Carl Falter was there. He was following me through the desert. And he said, Sumner, this is all, in 5 years we're going to do this. We're going to build an entertainment center here. We're going to do this. 5 years later, I went there. It's a construction site, and I spoke at the entertainment center. There was a desert 5 years earlier. So I do this all the time. I'm going back, as a matter of fact, to Dubai sometime before the first of the year to launch some pan-regional Arabian channels for Viacom, for MTV, and to launch a Nickelodeon park, which will be a new thing in Dubai.
Sumner, for one who has achieved so much in law, business, philanthropy, what's next?
Well, my main wish, the thing I think of most of all that's really important to me, is that I wake up tomorrow. What's next? What's next is to keep doing what I'm doing, to grow Viacom, to grow CBS, to create long-term value for our shareholders who are so important to us. And I think you will see that it's just the beginning. As I say, the beginning is today, not yesterday, and Viacom and CBS will move forward in this world and continue in my objective way to tell you to be the best media companies in the world.
Before we open it up for questions from the audience, I would just editorialize on your last comment by saying I'm reminded, when hearing your reaction to it, of the, on the facade of the National Archives building, there is the inscription, "The past is prologue." And some young rustic came in and said, "What does that phrase, 'the past is prologue,' mean?" And the tour guide said to him, "It means you ain't seen nothing yet." And I'm sure that based upon the past,
Al Jolson said that
Right.
too, or somebody.
we've had that debate. But now, if I can see beyond the lights, we would certainly open it up from questions from the audience. Down front.
Beginning with the driving theaters through to owning two giant companies today, you've demonstrated that you are talented at predicting trends. How are you able to stay so agile in such a rapidly changing media environment?
Well, I could give you a lot of reasons. The main reason, I think, is I enjoy what I'm doing. You should never spend your life doing what you don't enjoy. You will not succeed unless you enjoy what you... And by the way, I'm not supposed to mention this. I eat antioxidant food all day long. I exercise at least 60 minutes every day of my life, and that's the way I keep young and active. And by the way, I look a lot younger than I am. I hope you'll agree with that.
Another question?
There's somebody up
There's
there.
one here to the left. Right there.
With the increased segmentation of television and the shift away from primetime television, how has Viacom been able to take advantage of that? Obviously through MTV, but with highly specialized cable channels, there's less people watching primetime television on CBS and NBC. And so how have you taken advantage of that?
Start your question from the first sentence. I didn't catch that.
Okay.
I'm trying to get your basic premise, which may be right and may be wrong.
Okay, well, I trust you'll tell me.
I will.
Since people are starting to watch primetime television on the channels such as NBC and CBS and ABC less and less, and there's increased segmentation with television channels and with satellite and everything, how is Viacom taking advantage of that?
Well, I really don't understand your premise. They surely are not watching, I don't know about NBC, because, you know, that's not in the class of CBS, but they're certainly not watching CBS less. I've mentioned all the channels we have. They're the #1 channels in every part of the universe. And tell me who is going to stop. What teenager is going to stop watching MTV? What child is going to stop watching Nickelodeon? What preschooler is going to stop watching Rugrats or whatever? And we have a lot of new ones. No, I'm not worried about it, so don't you.
Because of time constraints, we have time for just one last question. It's very hard to see in here. Someone alluded to the fact that I taught a course in here at one time in real estate transactions with those blinding lights, and one of the 300 students came up to me one day at a subway stop and said, "You're Professor Schwarz, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "It's the first time I've seen you in person."
Whoever wants to ask the question, why not stand up so we can see you?
It's hard to see. Who has the mic?
Okay. Over the course of your illustrious... I'm sorry. I was told to stand up, correct? Over the course of your illustrious career, you've mentioned a lot of successes, a lot of achievements. Is there one that makes you most proud, one that resonates with you, that has maybe taught you your best lesson?
I guess the most successful acquisition I made, I'm talking business now, was Viacom. Because at that time, nobody even knew about the company. It was called Viacom. And what happened was, I was just an investor until Terry Elks, a name not known to you, very well known to me and now a friend, decided to steal the company, basically to buy it at a very, very low price. And that stimulated me to become more than an investor and to go for the company myself, which I did. That was the most important move I made, because without Viacom, there would have been no Paramount. There would have been no Nickelodeon, no MTV, no CBS. So that obviously was my most important and proudest moment.
Thank you. We turn it over to Dean O'Rourke.
When the topic arose of what we could give Sumner as a gift for taking time out of his busy schedule to come here today, they mentioned a baseball theme to me. And so my suggestion was a pinstripe jersey with NY on the front, the number 2 on the back, and the name Jeter. Fortunately, however, others prevailed. And so, Sumner, we wanted to present to you a jersey in your hometown team with Ted Williams' number on the back. I hear he was a pretty decent player in his time.
You want to know something? Thank you. I have something to say. I have been a Red Sox fan all my life, but what is the Home Office doing? Paying $100 million to a guy who can't pitch. What is a... No, Carl, I'm going to continue. What is the Home Office doing? Giving up Damon for $50 million and paying $70 million to some other guy? What is the Home Office doing? Giving up a pitcher that we need to get a closer that we don't need. I could go on and on, but Carl would be very upset. So I'll keep quiet.